Hey everybody, this is Perch. A couple days ago, I talked about the Batman One Bad Day or A Bad Day. I don't know. There's a bad day, and it's a series of one shots. But it's done in a way where it's a series of one shots, but it's giving some predictability to the shops and to the readers because you're getting one shot a month, starting in I believe August, going through March, and you're going through Batman's entire Rogues Gallery. And I think that's a very smart idea in the sense that their one shots come out, but comic shops often don't exactly know what to do with them, particularly if it's not an absolute top tier creative team. But if you have something that's coming out somewhat regularly with a bunch of different creative teams, but you can kind of characterize it in a, here are a bunch of villains, or there's some kind of connecting theme through all of it. I think that it winds up doing quite well. And I think this Batman One More Day is going to do quite well. But there are skeptics. So I've got a reader here who writes in. He says, actually, maybe it's she, actually, he or she. Anyway, it may be either. So I'm not assuming any gender here. Hey, Perch, I've been thinking about these recently announced Batman One Bad Day series of one-shots, and to be honest, I'm skeptical. Based on the title, logo, and descriptions, it is clear each one of these one-shots is taking inspiration from Batman: The Killing Joke and applying some of its concepts to the rest of the Rogues Gallery. That I agree with. It definitely feels like they're trying to cash in on that kind of theme. It's hard to tell if they're intentionally doing that or if they just don't have a lot of great ideas and thus it's happening almost by default. And it could go either way. There's a lot in comics that seem to be like that, where especially in this kind of Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, Frank Miller type area. In fact, some people who really hate Frank Miller, one writer, I think was over at Marvel, Nadia, is like constantly was very anti Frank Miller, and yet certainly incorporated a lot of his kind of thematic storytelling into her work. And I'm not quite clear that she knew she was doing that, but it absolutely was inspired and drawn from there. Anyway, it's funny how those things work. But back to the mail. It says, I guess it's a nice change of pace since the new 52 different Batman writers have tried to write the new Killing Joke, the new definitive Batman Joker story. Hopefully they've stopped trying to do that, at least for a while. I do not think they have stopped trying to do it. But anyway, the description of these one-shots suggests that each featured villain will get a sympathetic backstory angle. This seems to be an improvement, as Scott Snyder in Endgame and Jeff Johns in Three Jokers completely missed this and made the Joker evil from the start. I'm not quite as sure about that. I think it's okay for villains to just be villains. But anyway, no need to explain how an average man could become a monster. Why challenge a reader to engage in a little introspection about human nature, morality, and sanity when you can just present a simple morality play? All right, this is interesting because I agree and disagree. So what I agree with is that I do think the complexity is interesting, and I think you can, not having all the stories the same is a good plan. And I do think there's kind of simple morality plays that go on comics that aren't written with good heroism involved, and I think you just don't get a good result. On the other hand, I don't believe it's a mission. I don't believe you need to explain how every villain became a monster. I think in some cases it's kind of good to have these villains who are just full evil, and any kind of revelation into their history tilts that a little bit. So I think it's okay to have some characters. I mean, again, complexity is always good, so that's where I'm agreeing with the statement. At the same time, there's this odd imperative to want to explain and justify how villains became villains. And I think that if done well is great. It's often not done well. In fact, I think it's done poorly more than well, more of the time. I said that really clunky. I think people do it bad far more often than they do it good. And so I kind of cringe now when I hear now to learn the tragic backstory of Carnage. It's like, or just reserve a couple characters that you can just have be just dark, total evil. But anyway, sorry, I'm just narrowing myself. By contrast, Killing Joke asks the reader to grapple with difficult questions, which is what elevates it above your typical superhero story. Whether you like the book or not, its technical literary merits cannot be gainsaid. And it's true. The Killing Joke, and I think it's also very possible to dislike the Killing Joke, and yet, still recognize that it is a good, a complex, well-written story. It is. It is a very well-written story. I think, you can like it or dislike it, but the quality of the work is evident on the page. And I think that's made all the more true as you've seen people come in and try and do their versions of Killing Joke and do it poorly. Basically, you get people trying to do the same kind of complexity but without the skill, and it showcases kind of how bad that effort is, and it also showcases how the Killing Joke was quite a well done book. Anyway, um, let's see. We continue here. I honestly doubt these new one shots will use their sympathetic backstories as effectively. Totally agree. For one, what makes the Joker so damn scary in the book is how his sympathetic origin is juxtaposed with the heinous acts he's committing in present day. The same pitiable man you see in the flashbacks being the same person as the monster clown tormenting two beloved and established characters. And I agree with that, but that's kind of precisely why I don't think you should do that to every character. I think if every character had that kind of juxtaposition, it would make all of them less interesting. I think Joker as a character of duality, a character of complexity, it works. But if suddenly all the characters have the same kind of juxtaposition, I think everybody suffers as a result. But anyway, let's be real here. None of the villains featured in these new one-shots are going to do anything remotely as evil as what the Joker did to the Gordons. That is also true. In 2022, they're not going to let that happen. I doubt King, Taylor, and the others can even allow themselves to contemplate writing a supervillain to be that evil. Now, personally, I'm fine with that. I don't need to see every Batman villain get to that level of depravity. Heck, I don't even need to see the Joker get to that level too often. But if you're not willing to go there, why use the Killing Joke as a model at all? Exactly. I think that statement is full on true on many different functions. I think, and this is why so many pale imitations of Killing Joke wind up falling flat. You got to go, if you're going to do it, you got to do it. And I think this is a true statement, by the way, for all comics. I had somebody write me in a note, and I've just started deleting these. I had somebody going, it was one of these typical baiting mails. It was like, so you claim you're not a bigot, but then you also claim that social messages in the comics are done poorly. Well, if you're not a bigot, how do you justify your? It's like, if you write a mail like that, it's like, you know what? Delete. I'm not even getting to the end of this. Bullshit. Delete. But I think the same premise applies there too. And this is kind of my issue with a lot of the social themes in comics, or a lot of the LGBTQ representation in comics. It's called go all the way. And when I say go all the way, I mean commit. If you're going to do this, make the character three-dimensional, well-rounded, a full-on series. Commit to the bit. When you kind of dip a toe in the water, it comes off hollow and shallow, and that's how a lot of these things, from social stuff to these imitations of the Killing Joke. If you want to tell a strong environmental story, I mean, in many ways, a one positive I could give to X-Men Green, even though I think the negatives far outweigh the positives on every front. It's a truly heinous, abhorrent story. But as an eco story, at the very least, they gave us a character who was willing to go to all the way for their view of eco-terrorism, which is what it was. The only downside was that the writer seemed convinced to want to make it some kind of cutesy, funny book with little jokes in there, and ultimately to claim this character was a hero. But go all the way, and that book did. It went much further. Commit to the bit. Anyway, so I completely agree. If you're not willing to go there, why use a Killing Joke as a model at all? Absolutely. Why take from the Joker? Why not instead draw primarily on something else that's unique to each of these villains' long history? And that's true. That's my reservation as well. These books feel like they're all going to use the same template. They're different writers, but when you read the solicitations, there's a huge sameness in all of them. And I think that's going to really come through in the story. We'll see. I hope to be wrong. I guess in the end, it feels like the Killing Joke is being mined in a shallow way, where some of the iconic elements will be used, but the deeper ones underneath will probably be ignored, which I suppose is a fitting description of Alan Moore's influence on superhero comics in general. Damn, spitting truth in this mail. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't think they'll be ignored. I think they'll just, again, I don't think several of the people working in this, industry right now understand that level of what the story was about. It's again true with Alan Moore, true with Neil Gaiman, true with Grant Morrison, true with Frank Miller, true with Mark Grunwald. In their own ways, all of these writers were masters of their craft, and they also, their type of storytelling had detail, complexity, and nuance to it that was key to the story. So if you're going to come in, you're going to kind of parody them to some extent, or trying to acknowledge them, but you don't get the core elements that made that writer really powerful, made the stories great, then I don't know what you're doing. So anyway, I doubt. Back to the mail. I doubt most of these creative teams even sat down and gave The Killing Joke a thorough reread before creating these new stories. Who knows? I've sat with a lot of creators who talk about The Killing Joke, and it talks about some of these classic stories, Frank Miller's Born Again, and some of these. And as they talk about it, they clearly have missed the detail. And I would urge you, this is one case, and a lot of the people I interview, I do like, and I've said this before, this big nuance that people really miss is that I'm not out trying to interview everyone. In many cases, I interview people who I want to hear there's something in their story, whether it's, then there's lots of different ones, Kari Andrews, Jim Zub, a lot of the people I've talked to. But this is one area where I really appreciate Jeff Thorne, and I wish that more people would give him credit. They get hung up on like he's rude on Twitter, but Thorne gets these elements of the story, even if he doesn't like them. And I think that's really profound. I don't think a lot of people understand that. Jeff talks about kind of what, comics for kids and some of these elements that he doesn't like in comics and he wishes weren't there. But he understands the mastery even when he doesn't like the book. And that tiny little simple fact is why I get along with him well. It's why I think he's somebody worth listening to. It's you have to have the ability, particularly as a writer, to be able to understand things you don't like about what made them work. I haven't asked him about Killing Joke, but I don't think that, I would guess that Killing Joke is probably not his favorite book. But I would also guess, and we'll ask him next time he's on, I'd be willing to bet that he understands why it's powerful as a book, and he understands why it's remembered, and he understands why it's a great piece of writing, even if he doesn't personally like it. Pat Chan's another one. He gets it. A lot of the people I talk, and Joe, who's often a guest of this channel, is somebody that obviously I do a lot of stuff with. He gets it. It's important, and I wish in comics more people could have this ability to simply, even if they don't like the output, they feel comfortable saying I don't like it, but they still go through the process of understanding why others do and why it's a good piece of work. I think that's a lost art in a lot of comics, and it's something that people should be held up. Anyway, we'll finish off this mail. I've been interrupting quite a bit. After all, it's so iconic. Everyone knows The Killing Joke. Why take the time to carefully reread it again? Yeah, that is the perspective of a lot of people. Maybe I'm being too cynical, but these one-shots are deliberately inviting comparison between themselves and The Killing Joke. So I think it's fair to compare them. Yeah, the tagline is one bad day. Anyway, sorry for the long-winded question. What are your thoughts? Will these creative teams engage thoughtfully with Killing Joke in crafting these new one-shots? Or will we get the same shallow engagement we've had for the past decade? Almost absolutely certainly the last one. I don't hold a lot of faith that we're going to get a new Killing Joke, but I still love the idea. And by idea, I don't mean the parody of, or it feels like a parody of Killing Joke. I mean the idea that you're going to come out with some one-shots, you're going to explore the villains, the rogues gallery of Batman. You're going to do one a month. You've got these different creative teams lined up. This is smart. This is a smart publishing decision. I think you could do the exact same thing with Spider-Man, with Avengers, with, absolutely Spider-Man. But Superman, this would be very clever to do. And I think if you could do a story that, and this is the flaw of doing it based off The Killing Joke. Do a truly heinous villain story. Do something that is that really cements this character, this villain, as iconic of being a villain, somebody who should be threatening and feared and dangerous. Deliver that, and if you do, I think that you set yourself up that 6 months, 12 months later, these characters show back up in the solo title as a major threat to the hero. Wouldn't it be great if one of these one shots of Batman, say the one for Clayface, involved him doing something, maybe Clayface always had some kind of line of mass murder or some terrible aspect that he never tipped over, but in this book he sinks to a new level of villainy, and as a result levels up and becomes a much worse threat. And so the outcome of this story is that 6 months, 9 months from now, we get a just awful Clayface, 6-part story in Batman that sells and does really well because you've established him as a major threat that can make money, that can generate attention. That would be an amazing outcome. I think that would be great, and I'd love to see that happen in this. I think, like I said, do this with Superman, do this with Spider-Man. Rather than go to the Green Goblin is coming back and he's probably going to F things up again. I mean, let's do one where you walk through the Rogues Gallery and almost use it as a chance to also define and rehab them a bit. I don't think you need to go into the sympathetic backstory, but what you can do is identify, like, hey, Kraven the Hunter. Let's get him back on the map of being a threatening, powerful villain as opposed to a comedic sidekick of Squirrel Girl. Like or whatever, like a clone of a clone farm that just do something where the character gets to shine. I think it'd be great. Anyway, great mail. Thank you for the very thoughtful question and ability to kind of talk through what makes a story a story. I'm curious what other people think, and I'm curious also if somebody wants to weigh in to say, that other aspect to this of, I don't like, do you like Killing Joke? If you don't like Killing Joke, do you still recognize that it was a finely written piece of work that, ultimately told a powerful story? Does that resonate with you? Curious to know. Anyway, thanks for listening. And that was my tagline. Thanks for listening.